Hello, Concrete.
Morning.
I'm getting everything set up. I'll be right back here.
Okay.
Check. All right, let's get that whack ass music out of here. Where is Sister George gonna be here?
Yeah, she was planning. I haven't spoke to her this morning, but yeah, when we talked, we both talked about yesterday actually. So yeah, she may be just running a few minutes late.
Gotcha. Great.
Yes.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I don't know. I'm processing last night, so
Wait,
went
what
on
was
for a
last
while.
night that you processing?
Oh, I was talking to BGS.
Oh yeah, I was here for about 30, 45 minutes while I was cleaning the house before I started getting ready for bed. But what is there to process? Was it a whole lot of information or
Well, it's more like a reevaluation of what it is. Oh, there she is. All right, let me bring it up real quick. Oh, let's all be equal up here. All right, so yeah, it's like a oh, hey, Sister George, by the way.
hey
Good
girl?
morning. Good morning.
Morning. How are you?
I am doing okay. Sorry for my tardiness, but I'm here.
Nah, black people. You know what I mean.
CP time.
Y'all
I was expecting.
already know.
I had at least a 15-minute buffer, so
Oh, oh wow. You really doing
Wow.
us like that though?
Girl, he
no,
been trying
yeah,
to play us for a minute now,
He
child. I don't know.
have been. You ain't lying.
not like I had an interview also set up with Obsidian, and the same thing happened, and
He was late.
yeah, and BGS had we had a miscommunication, the same thing. So it's like just like all right, my rule now is I'm gonna say a time, and I'm probably gonna do like they did in the military and say 15 minutes before the actual time I
Oh,
actually.
smart. I do
Wow.
that whenever I'm going out, like any place in Atlanta, I always tell people a half hour before the actual scheduled time because they won't like seat you until your whole party is there. So I always tell people earlier than what I expect or what I've made the reservation for.
Wait, you be doing that to me?
No comment.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay, I see how
No,
this
you
is
ain't too
going.
bad. You fairly timely. You pretty timely.
Okay.
I don't have to do that with you.
hmm
Okay.
I'm watching you now.
No, I was just talking to Concrete about me processing last night. I was talking to BGS. Um, with Obsidian, I've done a lot of uh, I'm not really as familiar with Obsidian's content as I am with BGS, so I had to like go and research a bunch of stuff. So I had a bunch of stuff planned for Obsidian and things like that. Got a little bit of a structure, but BGS, it's like, you know what? I'll just talk and just see what happens. So we was talking, and we ended up out in the weeds somewhere.
Oh wow, because I was getting ready to ask like how did that go? BGS is actually kind of fun to talk to sometimes.
Yeah, we ended up off the reservation somewhere. So and
Y'all
it
were
made
talking
me.
about some real high level stuff. I mean, like it would go from something specific regarding the Black community to like AI and all kinds of terms that I'm not like completely familiar with. So I was like, ooh, this is a high level conversation.
Yeah,
Yes, I love to see it.
yeah. We went on into what am I actually trying to accomplish with doing these interviews, and I'm like, you know what? I don't really know, but I kind of
That is
sat
an
on it.
interesting question, especially because I see that you seem to be not cherry picking, but very specific in those that you are seeking to interview. So I would have thought that you had, that there was a specific agenda for the interviews as well.
Right, right.
I thought there was, but as I was talking to BTS, I realized I didn't really have one.
Oh.
Yeah, or at least it wasn't personal. Like the agenda I had wasn't mine; it was just an agenda. You know what I mean? Um, so
Gotcha.
so I was thinking about everything we talked about last night, and I kind of came this morning. I think I know the direction that I want this to go. Now I think I have like I got like a thread on something I can pull on here. So we're gonna see where this goes. Hope you guys are ready for
Uh-oh.
that.
Right. Uh-oh. Okay. I'm ready. I'm
Right.
ready.
All right. So yeah, I guess when I was talking to him, well, first, I guess tell me how you guys even ended up in the Manosphere in the first place. I kind of know, but when Sister George was talking about how she met Curlin and everything, I was like, oh, I didn't know it started on Facebook and stuff like that. So can you kind of give me a background?
You want to go first,
Um,
Dan?
sure, sure. So on Facebook, I used to be in a lot of Facebook groups and somehow so Tommy would be like my first introduction to like red pill content, and that was like right after I had my son. So we're talking almost 10 years ago. So I will watch some of Tommy's content, but you kind of shy away. And then I ended up coming into contact with Jason Black. I was on his show a couple of times. And then I went through to Nicole Michelle, which I met through Jason Black, and I ended up in her Facebook group. And that's where I met Curlin, actually from Nicole Michelle's Facebook group. And so then Curlin would tell me about BGS, um, Pimp God, Rom Wills, and a couple of other content creators, but those were the most prominent. And so I started listening to some of them, and I ended up on Obsidian show. I remember like coming into the Manosphere, going on a couple of panels, and then I came across Concrete, and I think I came across Concrete at first on Obsidian show. Then we went on to like the B1 network, and we would see each other all the time over there, and then BGS, and the rest is history. But yeah, that's kind of how I ended up here.
Hmm. What about you, Concrete? What you got?
I would say probably about almost 6 years ago, my first introduction to the space on like the YouTube platform was through O'Shea's channel. Um, this was like I believe I can't remember. It might have been like his Sunday Rumble shows. Like it just came up on my timeline. I don't know. At the time, I think like I would occasionally listen to like Paris, and there was another young lady that I absolutely loved in the space, and she was a Muslima, and there was something controversial that happened with her, and she ended up shutting down her page. But I started listening to her. She had a very small channel. She was very articulate, very smart woman. She seemed to be very balanced, but there was something controversial that happened with her. I think maybe she spoke out against the men in the manosphere or something, and people got upset about it. And that was the first person I started listening to. Then I would listen to like Paris a little bit. And because of that, the content that they were both producing, O'Shea came up one day in my feed, and I clicked on it and I started listening to O'Shea. And you know how O'Shea is with the fucker, well, used to be with the fuckery, and it was just extremely entertaining. And I started listening regularly, and through O'Shea, I started going to other platforms. So Obsidian, eventually like BGS's the BGS for Women channel, definitely B1. And, I kind of came across a lot of other content creators, but I listened for probably like 6 to 8 months before I even started to engage, because I could see through O'Shea's channel, like how the attitude that some of the men would take with the women in the comments, and kind of how derogatory some of their commentary could be. So I would just listen for quite some time before I started to engage.
All right, so Concrete, all right, so when you got here and well, let me reverse course on that. Did you guys kind of would you say you got here because of the entertainment angle, or the entertainment angle first, and then kind of made your way into the other stuff, or it, like I guess how would you characterize how you like the type of content that drove you into space?
I would say, yeah, definitely the entertainment element initially, but I thought that the conversations, like the topics, were very intriguing, and they were discussions that needed to be had. Like, oftentimes the titles kind of are similar to the kind of conversations that we do. There was a lot of fuckery involved too, and you didn't get a ton of serious conversation unless O'Shea was doing like a one-on-one interview before he opened the panel. But there was a huge entertainment element that drew me to the space.
I would say with me, I was going through a lot of transformation. And when I was on Facebook, I was in a lot of groups that I would consider like Facebook manosphere. And this was a little bit after my mom passed, my mom and my sister passed. And so I was extra, extra, extra sisterhood. And then it was like going through a lot of bad situations and having nobody to look at but myself in a lot of those situations. And so then it was like coming through on my journey of self awareness. And so with my journey of self-awareness, that kind of led me to Tommy and the things that Tommy would talk about as far as Black women were concerned, and then taking a look at my own family members, my own family structures, and women in general that I knew. And so then when I would come to the manosphere, it started out like more so on a self-awareness journey and acknowledging um, some of the things that I've complained about and how I've contributed to those aspects. And then I think it became more of an entertainment aspect for me at some point.
Yeah. I'm thinking, okay, so Concrete, you said the conversation needed to be had. Could you describe what you mean by that? Like, what do you mean by that?
So I think, okay, so now that I think about it, I think her name was Allie. That was her name. And I saw her actually on O'Shea's channel after I started to watch his content. I would see her in the comments, and I think a couple times she was also up on his panel. But I feel like there were discussions surrounding the breakdown in the Black community, the change in gender roles, like discussions surrounding feminism. There were even, like, when I was watching O'Shea, there were even quite a few political conversations that I was not able to take part in some of the other circles that I traveled in on social media. So this is when he had what was the conservative guy that was very controversial and everyone hated? Oh my gosh, I can't think of his name. He was like a jerk, but he used to always be on O'Shea's channel. Then he had his own like political conservative show. I can't think of his name, but
Was it
yeah. So
RBN?
there were. Wait, what's his name?
Was it RBN or whatever?
He went by his full name, so I know it wasn't an acronym, but
Okay.
I can't think of him. But he was very controversial. He used to wear glasses. He looked kind of like Raj from What's Happening. But yeah, so
Who,
the
Complex Design? No.
no, I've never seen Complex. I
Oh,
can't think of his name, but yeah, he was like very controversial. Nonetheless, the conversations primarily centered around, you know, the change in gender roles and feminism, and you know, things that contributed to like the breakdown in the Black community, which I found to be very intriguing and very necessary.
So you okay, so you noticed that something in the community was going on, and you recognize that in this space there's a conversation being had that kind of pointed to this. I'm just trying to make sure I'm getting it right. That kind of pointed to this whatever is going on, and what intrigued you was the fact that the light was being shown on this. Is that, would you say that was that's accurate?
Absolutely. And I had also been in Facebook groups for years, but the Facebook groups that I was in, they were co-ed groups, and a lot of the conversation was dominated by these strong-willed women in the groups. There were men that I would say have probably a red pill ideology. They certainly did not call it that, but I would say, like, because I also got to hear a lot of male perspective, which in the circles that I was traveling in on social media, I wasn't able to hear on the uninterrupted on these specific subjects.
Interesting. Sister George, you said you were going through a personal transformation at the time. Um, a lot had happened in your personal life, especially with the women in your personal life, and you started to recognize things in the manosphere that was being said that was actually happening in your real life. Um, I guess what. Trying to figure out a way to form this question is what. I guess this is for both of you. Is that true for both of you? Like when you came to the space, like was there like this? I don't know. What do you think triggered this introspection? Do you think?
well, for me, um, so I got fired from my job. I lost my mom, and then I lost my sister, and that happened in the course of a month. Then I had relationship issues where I was dealing with a guy that wasn't necessarily deeply into me, and then having relationship issues as far as it was concerning my friends and my family. And so with me, it was like I used to point the finger at everybody but me for things that was happening in my life. And so, I never really had a cause for introspection until I had to go through some painful times by myself. And so when I started to go through those painful times, I ended up going to therapy, and therapy is kind of what triggered this whole process for me. And that caused me to have a lot of introspection and to actually do the work to heal myself. And, then thinking about the things that I've gone through, listening to the manosphere as it pertains to women and the type of choices that I had made in my life, then it was like, you know what, there's a deeper conversation to be had here. And, you know, um, it's about us recognizing each other and trying to get down to the bottom of why we're like this, and then understanding that, and then starting a healing process, and to identify some things.
But before you start, concrete, I just wanted to ask, what do you guys think what do you think the men in the manosphere want? Perceive that the men in the manosphere want?
Mm. Okay. So first off, I wasn't necessarily in a transitional stage. I guess during my initial introduction to the space, a year or so into my introduction into the space, I started dating my soon-to-be husband, and I can say that he does not consider himself red pill. He doesn't feed into like all of the catchphrases and things of that nature, but he's a very conscious black man. And to me, there are some obvious parallels. When we talk about consciousness, we're talking about elevating yourself, and you absolutely, you understand the world around you. Like there's an understanding that you're coming into relating to the world around you. So I do say that though, being in the space also allowed me to hear from men who were like-minded in some ways to my future husband. Now, to answer your question as it relates to, actually, Danny, you go first, as it relates to what the men in the manosphere want. I have to give that a little bit of thought.
I think that men in the manosphere want sweet, cooperative, fun-loving women. I think the men in the manosphere want loyalty. Um, I think they want somebody that's able to cook and clean, and I think that they sort of want to go back to certain aspects of traditional values. And like, I think they want women. I think they want to be happy. I think that and that's not necessarily them wanting a separate wife, but I think they want somebody that's down for them, that's going to care for them, that's going to have their back, that knows how to take care of children. It's interesting because I don't think the men in the manosphere are weird or awkward as it pertains to the things that they want. I don't think they're outside of the scope of what any other man would want. They want to deal with sexy women, women that attract them, that turn them on. Yeah, I don't think it's a monolith here though either.
I would agree with that last part, definitely. I don't think the men in the space are monolithic. I would say the primary thing that the men in the manosphere want is the primary things would be peace and cooperation. I do think like a lot of, for especially for new women coming into the space that are not familiar with the rhetoric, they'll be taken aback by some of the things that are said. But I truly think that most of the men here want peaceful lives with women that look like me. And when I say women that look like me, I'm talking about black women. I think that literally the men in this space, like, I think in many ways this is kind of a last ditch effort to have conversations that will kind of allow both parties to come to the table and to develop some sort of resolution. But I think that above all else, they're really looking for peace and cooperation. And I think women are like, okay, well, what am I going to get out of this? But to be completely honest, providing peace for the men in your life absolutely is beneficial to you as well. Like literally by providing a man with peace, and that's essentially the number one thing that he's looking for. He will provide for you. He provides a sense of security for you, financially, emotionally, physically. He cares about your well-being. He will go out of his way to ensure that your life is happy and peaceful as well. But I think those are the two primary things that men in the manosphere want.
Yeah, it's interesting. I got a question for you again, Concrete. Do you think men may this space to attract women? Like, do you think they made this space to actually like try to resolve something with women?
Initially, I don't think that this space was created to attract women. I think that it was created for men to have, conversations surrounding, things that they have in common, and relationship issues and the like. But I think that throughout the development of the space, that men understand that women are coming to the space. And as a result, I don't think that the initial goal of the space is the same as the current goal, if that makes sense.
What do you think the current goal is?
I think that part of the current goal is the men truly deep down inside want some resolution. But I also think that it's also to educate other men, to educate other men regarding, what's out there, also to share, similar experiences, and to kind of, talk about their own nuanced experiences relating to women, and to I was about to say commiserate, but to do that with to do that with people who have, similar experiences. I do think part of the overall goal for many of the men in this space is they want resolution.
It's okay. So, and it sounded like you said two different things going on, or maybe multiple different things.
I did. Because I don't think that
Yeah.
that is, yeah, I don't think that that is the only goal. I guess I'll say that. But I think that part of the overall goal for many of the men in this space is resolution.
Okay. Or you think that's at least the case of the new people who have come into the space?
Yeah, for sure, the new people, and some of the people that have been here. To be completely honest, if you listen to their conversation, they're essentially saying we want women to act right. Like if you listen to some of the people that have been here for years, if you listen to what they're saying, that's ultimately kind of what they're expressing.
Right. Um. What really got me thinking last night is I remember the original, uh, release on YouTube, the original mission of the Red Pill space, and one of those missions were to, you know, get you off the plantation and make it so that, you know, you're no longer used and that you have full autonomy of yourself. Um, and I think a lot of that angst, or at least as it was explained, came from men feeling like they are used not just by the government, like, you know, get you into work, get your tax money, make sure you get work for the state, and then work yourself to death kind of thing, but also in the sense that families, a lot of what red pill rage kind of encompasses is like you were sold a bill of goods that said if you did blank blank and blank, then, you know, you'd have your, you know, you'd have your pickings of, you know, whatever kind of woman that, you know, you had in your head. But what a lot of guys have realized was, you know, all that stuff wasn't true, and their families and the people around had lied to them. And not only that, that when they get into relationships with, when a lot of these guys were getting into relationships with women, they were finding that, you know, this virtuous, you know, women are, you know, up to be on this pedestal kind of idea, counter to what they were experiencing, and which is where a lot of the analysis from, I guess, female behavior started to come from. It's like, well, we told, you know, women are just nice and, you know, floating above the clouds. They kind of had that angel in the house kind of mentality, you know, like floating on air, morally superior, very empathetic kind of thing. And then they were finding out that I get into relationships with these women, and then not only is she using me, but but she's like mean. She's like a jerk. so so
Right.
uh, uh, um, I guess I say all that to say what made me what I just say this outright. What makes me kind of sad about the space now is that it seems like men are content with being used. Like go back to the user transaction situation. Is that something you see? Can you guys kind of open up the landscape as to what you guys see men really talking about, like as far as um, what they think these relationships should look like? Like, yes, you know, the beautiful, attractive woman, but is there more? I guess is my question. Do you think they want more, or is that it?
Okay, let me make sure I understand your question because you said you were talking about did men create the space to attract women, and then you said about men being used, and then you mentioned about is it about them just being attracted to the woman?
Everything up into that last part. The last part is like, is it like I saw the space go from create your own kind of autonomy for yourself and reclaim your manhood to um, in order to be a man you need to meet these certain wickets to attract a woman. It's going backward almost, and I'm trying to figure out why it's going backward. Like, do you guys think that the buck stops at if you know, well, she if she just, I don't know, just act right, then I'll willingly just, like, you know, trot myself back over there and be like, you know, I don't know, like, do you kind
I
of see what I mean though?
I do see what you mean. I'm not going to necessarily say that I see it going backwards. More so than men kind of recognizing their positions and acquiescing to some of those positionings. If we're looking at the marital rate has decreased for everybody, for the most part. So men aren't necessarily getting married to said women. Um, a lot of attractive women are very, very, very single. Generally, nowadays, if I see like people getting married, most of the people that I've seen getting married actually want to be married, and they seem to be more so marrying for the right reasons. If a man is exercising his options and saying, okay, I get that if I want to deal with a certain type of female, if I want to deal with a really, really attractive female, then I understand that it's going to require these certain things. I understand where I am on the scale. I understand where she is on the scale. And I think they're moving accordingly. With the space in itself, while the space does talk and it does seem like it's going backwards at a lot of times it does seem like it's going backwards. But when I'm looking at the comments and looking what men are calling women out on and seeing what they're agreeing with us about, seeing what they're disagreeing with us about, and being able to kind of take an inventory, I think that a lot more are starting to wake up. And so if the men are waking up, everything requires a process. You have some men that came and got what they needed, and they're able to build the life that they want to build. Um, and then you see some men, it's going to take a little bit more time for them to kind of get it through their heads on what's going on. But I don't see as many within this sector that are like ridiculously sleeping. I think some things are money ploy. Um, I don't know. I see a lot of stuff within the space.
Hmm.
I see a lot.
I think I have the wrong understanding of the question because my answer. Can you rephrase the question? I'm sorry.
It could have been me too,
No,
concrete.
No,
So I
because
don't
I'm
want
like,
to.
am I understanding this right?
no. Go ahead, Concrete. I want you to answer however you perceive the question to be.
So basically, I want to say first off, I think that in reference to some in a line with what Danny said, I think that Black men or men in the space have and are recognizing their power. They recognize that they are essential. And I think that as a result of recognizing that, they are, moving in a way to say, hey, if you don't come to the table, we're opting out of this agreement. Um, but in my heart of hearts, I don't believe that many men, although we have been in the space that will say, I'm no longer participating in this system. I think their actions say something completely different. And I don't know if that is because they feel like, this is the easiest thing for them to do. It's more difficult for them to, travel outside the country, find a wife, and, do all the things. But I feel like that's kind of why I originally said that I feel like most of the men in the space want a resolution, because I don't see I don't see the majority of Black men opting out of the very system that they're speaking out against. Yeah, I forgot my other point, but essentially, that's it.
No, it's good. And I think if I'm thinking about it with the Black Manosphere, it's always been that way. It's not. It hasn't ever really been, you know, chucking the deuces completely. It's been like, trying to reach some level of reconciliation with the when the white
Mm-hmm.
manosphere was the overarching manosphere. Then it was more like, we done with y'all broads. but,
Right, right, right.
but I guess you said they're recognizing they are essential.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
what do you mean by that? I guess is my question.
I think, Black men or men in the relationship have long been, just looked at as strictly providers. And Black women, because that's who most of my relationships have been with, and that's what I've seen growing up, have often kind of talked about and or made Black men feel as though they're not essential, that they're replaceable, that you can leave, I'll find another one. And I think that Black men are recognizing their inherent value and understanding that the community is falling apart, and it will continue to do so if we don't step in and intervene in any way. And I think like that in and of itself, and hearing so many men use that talking point to one degree or another, is a great example of Black men recognizing how essential they are, by Black men saying, if we pull out of this very system, it will fall apart. If we stop, coaching and taking young boys who are fatherless under our wings, if we stop, protecting Black women, if we stop giving them certain benefits that they've had, although they don't publicly recognize these benefits, then the community will be in dire straits and will be in an even worse position than what we've seen in our lifetimes.
Yeah, and so let me ask you both this question. Do you think that there definitely has been a devaluation of men, at least in the Black community?
Um, I say yes. There has been a devaluation of Black men in the community for a very long time, and this is an unpopular opinion amongst my sisters, but it is absolutely the truth. Listen, and I don't like to regurgitate the talking points of this space, but some of them are very valid. Even something as small as look how Black men are celebrated on Father's Day in comparison to how Black women are celebrated on Mother's Day. Like Black men, we never publicly acknowledge the sacrifices that Black men make for us and have made for us. And I'm talking about we as a group. Yeah, there are those exceptions, and me and Danny even have some of these conversations and highlight. A couple of weeks ago, we did a women's panel where we talked about this very point that I'm talking about now. But I'm talking about en masse. We don't recognize the contribution that Black men make to our communities, and we seldomly celebrate them.
I actually have to agree with Concrete, and a lot of what she said, especially um, how things have been versus what they, and it kind of seems like that's been a common theme with the women in our community, that our men aren't shit. And yeah, I think there has absolutely been a devaluation of men, even when, and I've spoken with a couple of divestors, and then when I start to ask them about men that they've seen in their own family, or have they ever not seen a good example of a man, and do they hold women to those same standards, it really does come across as very much so devaluation. So I think that's a very good, what Concrete was saying was very true.
Where do you guys think that comes from? Like where do you think like that this kind of stuff just doesn't bubble up from nowhere? And like if you can, and I know I can feel probably more concrete slavery is probably
You
going to come out.
already, you know where I'm going. Like, listen, I'm gonna tell you something. This is like this is an unpopular opinion as well, but I'm full of them. So what's new? I've literally this is something that I am very this is a point that I'm very committed to. And this is something I believe with all of my heart. Myself and my fiance, we constantly discuss this topic, and he doesn't agree. And typically, like, he's pretty logical. And I'm one of the people, like, I'll listen to your arguments. And to be completely honest, there's not a whole lot of things that I hold firm to except my love of Black people. But this one thing I truly believe, and it comes from me being a Black woman. I do think that it stems back to slavery. I do think that most of our time on this continent, we have not felt protected. I think that Black women, there was a period of time, the 70s, maybe part of the 80s, where there was mass protection of Black women. There was a very communal mindset. But I think that, if you go back to slavery, and I understand, in hindsight, looking back, that, in many instances, Black men's hands were tied. You had Black women that were being raped in front of their husbands. You had, Black women that were, their babies were stripped from their arms and their husbands couldn't do anything. That takes a very strong toll on the psyche of a woman, and the mindset of those women who had to witness that. Is pervasive throughout, the culture, and it's passed on. Literally, when I say it's passed on, I mean that the lack of respect that Black women have for their partners is something that's passed on. You even see that if you, like, literally, there are slave tales that you can read in the Smithsonian. Like, you see that in the Black women mammies, like, chasing a Black man away from her pies. Get your, like, the way she talked to him, like, she, like he was a child, essentially. I think that, like, that lack of respect literally comes from feel the lack of protection that Black women have felt from our counterparts for generations.
I had a feeling you'd say that. What
I
about
ain't
you,
that
Sister George?
predictable.
Say
What about
again,
you,
I'm
Sister?
sorry. Will you
What
repeat the question for me?
where do you think that devaluation of men comes from?
Oh, um, I don't know. I really don't know. To me, because initially I would say that I kind of had like the same thought process as Concrete, but to me, it's always been a sense of tribalism somewhere. Um, when we came here, and I don't know it, because if you're going back to Africa and there's been a sense of tribalism, then there are going to be situations where the woman isn't going to be necessarily protected, or the kids are going to be necessarily protected. Um, so then when you come to a state like this, or a country like America and other Western countries where slavery happened and a lot of bad things happened to us, um, there's been accounts of Black women not handling things a certain way, or Black women doing certain things that hasn't been conducive to Black people's plights. And so when you look at it like that, I think that social media kind of exposes like everything to a certain degree now, or to a lot of degree of things that I think had always been in existence. So I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure.
All right. The a lot of what Concrete said, um, I agree with to an extent. I think all cultures on the planet help people survive where they're at physically. And those ideas being passed down from generation to generation is just information that says, okay, this is the type of environment you live in. So these are the type of ideas that's going to help you survive in it. And when you have, you know, women getting raped in front of men, their children being easily taken away, marriages easily being able to be dissolved. You're feeling like you're constantly under threat of some kind of physical harm or attack, um, and not feeling that like you will be protected, which is something we hear a lot from the other side, not the manosphere, but but I guess the divestment space or whatever they call themselves. So so you got these ideas that are being that it's like, okay, so we get out of slavery, those ideas don't just disappear into nothing. It's like those ideas are transmitted because the environment is still relatively the same. So it's like, oh, now
Very
we're
true.
during reconstruction, still under that same threat of physical harm, still have no rights that, white man is bound to respect, in Jim Crow, same thing. Moving into civil rights, same thing. So you got hundreds of years of this pattern being spread down. But to Sister George's point, and I guess to ask this of you, Sister George, you said you went through a transformation. So like usually when people feel something, there's something personal there. What Concrete was explaining in the transmission of cultural ideas is more like it's personal because those ideas are transferred to you, but it's not like yours. It's just kind of in the background, like playing like white noise. The I guess what she said boils down to, I think, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, people not feeling safe, Black women especially not feeling like they feel safe. Would you say before your transformation that that's a sentiment that you had?
No. Um, but the type of family that I came from, right? I dealt with a mother that was on and off drugs for a lot of her life. I'm not gonna say the most of it, but a lot of her life she was, and I was around during some of those times. I was also with a grandmother. I lived with my grandmother who had seen um, a bit of struggle, while she was young, and then was able to uh, do really well for herself in life, or actually get to middle class. So I'm not gonna say just extremely well, but was actually able to get to middle class. So I never would say that I grew up with having a certain thought process of men not being shit, because my mother was also a villain, quote unquote, in her own right. And with my mom kind of being like that, it wouldn't always be the man's fault if some bad stuff happening. But I would say with me, it was me putting myself in situations and a lot of the situations I put myself in, I never really had to go through. And my mother would try to point these things out, but even then, I wouldn't necessarily listen to her because I didn't feel like she knew what she was talking about. And then I would relegate the things that she was saying, like basically to be BS because of her past. And so she would tell me, well, you don't think you're part of the problem with that. And I'm like, what would she know about that? Um, she's had these mistakes in her life. And so I would try to relegate things to her mistakes and saying that she didn't know what she was talking about, as opposed to looking at my own BS and saying that, okay, I chose to deal with um whoever I chose to deal with. And even when bad things happen and I continue to deal with those situations, I was complicit in a lot of the things that I went through. So I'm not going to say for me that that was the a big part of a culture that I existed in. Um, I got a chance to see it from both sides, I would say, for me. But with me personally, um, why I would say it was because of situations I put myself in and wanted everybody to take responsibility and accountability for those situations, everybody but me. And so when I came, it was like they were reiterating lessons that I already learned, in the space. They would reiterate a lot of those things, but it kind of took me a minute to kind of wake up to my own stuff.
Can I add a little bit of clarity to my point?
Sure.
So really quick, and I'm not saying like I wasn't hitting on like the fact that black women were made to believe. Well, partially, I guess my overall point was not regarding black women being made to believe that black men ain't ish, but as it relates to the lack of protection. Now, me personally, I'm not even really saying that that's my personal story. I have four brothers who are very large, and very they have reputations that I lived in a small town. I'm from Wisconsin, but most of my formative years were like I was in a very small town. And even when we lived in Milwaukee, my brothers had a reputation, and they're very big guys. So I always felt, and then between that and my dad, I personally have pretty much my entire life felt protected by black men, especially those who were, my immediate family. But there have been times in relationships, like I told, on our last stream, I was talking about a situation where like a 20 something year old guy tried to talk to me. The first time a guy tried to talk to me, a grown man tried to talk to me, I was 11 and he was 20 something. Like times like
Wow.
that, like like I feel like if you're being preyed upon, and there was an entire group of black men out there when he was trying to talk to me. I talked about being 13 and a grown man saying, "Oh, I can't wait till you turn 18," and things of that nature. And like literally they would
Wow.
say this in the company of other men. So there still have been times, although I have a very strong male presence in my life, and I've, felt protected most of my life, there are still those isolated incidents where I did not feel protected. And I think that women, I've heard women kind of share the same types of stories, as well.
It's interesting. And just to add on to that, I think you brought up some good points. And I don't know if, because there's certain things that I'm going to say that it's almost numbing, or I'm numb to at this stage in my
Mm-hmm,
life
mm-hmm.
now. And so with me being numb to a lot of it, then, I was a tomboy growing up. Then the type of men that I was attracted to at one point were very much so players, and um, dealing with those types. And then the type of studies and stuff that I've gone to, personal studies that I've studied, as far as manipulation and stuff like that. A lot of the things I'm going to say that I was numb to. Now, I'm not going to say that I was always protected. I wouldn't consider the protection that I had as a little girl was the same as Concrete's. I didn't have any brothers. Now my grandfather was my grandfather, and I had an uncle, but I'm not going to necessarily say that it was a protection thing. And my grandfather died when I was 11, and so I wasn't familiar with my father. So I knew them, but I wasn't ever around them like enough to actually feel a certain type of protection. But even in that, I'm not going to say that a lot of Black men harmed me either. You know what I'm saying? And if, okay, and a lot of people will say that, they're wrong, they're wrong, they're wrong, they're wrong, they're wrong. And seeing a lot of the things that I'm seeing around social media and trying to understand physical attraction versus taking a person's age into consideration, I think a lot of things happen on a different scale that we've been kind of conditioned to ignore. And I'll give you an example, like my child going to daycare, and every time he would be at daycare, um, he's a handsome little boy, but he would be in a lot of every time he would be in like one of the caretaker's arms every time I would go to pick him up, and I would feel like they would sometimes give him more attention than they would give other children. I've seen that the same things happen to little girls, to where attractive children tend to get a lot more attention, or if they have a certain type of shape and what people are attracted to and how they express attraction to children. And it sounds horrible, and maybe I'm not phrasing it right because of,
Nah, I
me
follow.
saying it out my mouth. Yeah, it sounds horrible, but it's like I've been able to kind of watch and take an inventory on how those things go. And I think maybe I had a bit of understanding of that from a young age, because even understanding my own body and noticing my own body, and when it started to take form when I was a young girl, um, it's just interesting because I was like, I had a shape and I was like, oh wow, I'm shaped just like my mom, or, things like that. So it becomes very interesting when you say it out loud, and it sounds so horrible to say it out loud, but I think that has a lot to do with, so I'm not going to say that those type of things made me feel unprotected. I did have an experience where I really went through something traumatic, but I still never looked at it as all men were out to get me, or um I wasn't protected, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say that I don't think men were out to get me. I don't feel like everything harmed me. I just think it's the nature of
Yeah.
people.
Me too.
And
Like personally, I didn't feel like men
yeah.
were out to get me. I'm just speaking in a general sense. But yeah, I agree with you.
No, I understand. Comment says pause, by the way.
Yeah, I get it. It's a hard thing to express out loud because it sounds horrible, but understanding how people treat um if you have a shape when you're young and men notice your shape and they make comments about it, it's still a thing that was noticed. Now, they definitely shouldn't have made a comment towards, but it's still things that people notice. If you have a child that is 14 but he's muscular and women comment on that, no, it's still a comment that they shouldn't have made, but it's still
Right.
things that people notice. And it gets to be really really interesting, but it's a hard thing to dive off into, but it's just things that I've taken inventory of for myself. So I don't know.
Yeah. I just want to make it clear. I'm not trying to lead you guys down any gotcha paths or anything. So if you're like,
No, like I said, it's hard.
No,
It's
some
really
people
really
do that.
hard.
So I'm glad
Yeah.
you clarified, because some people in the space will do that.
Yeah, and say, well, she tried to make excuses. No, that's not what I'm trying to do at all. It's just some things that I've noticed. And even for myself, it's things that I've noticed. Now it's just for me to say out loud.
yeah, and I guess my whole path about this is really just trying to dig down to what is true. I don't really care about all the stuff that other people are talking about, like, oh, he's, simping or whatever the hell people are saying nowadays. But I'm trying to boil down to the truth of both aspects, because just like the manosphere has points that are true, like men have been ignored, men have been pushed aside, and not only by their own families but by society. And I think that's objectively true, especially for Black men. Um, and I think to deny that would be very silly, because there's a lot of
Mhm.
evidence to it. But at the same time, if we can sit here and say that yes, the manosphere has points that are true, then so also does the other side. You see what I'm saying? Like, if they're saying,
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
if you got multiple people saying they don't feel safe, or they don't feel protected, that's coming from somewhere. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't Black men that are trying to protect Black women, and it doesn't even necessarily mean
Mhm.
there weren't Black men trying to protect those women in their lives. What it does mean, though, is they had the perception that they weren't protected for some reason. Um,
Mm. Yeah,
I
I
think
agree.
and
that's a great point. I think that's a great point. Um, I I do have a bit of a question for you.
Go ahead.
Okay. When you see social media and it's things that are perceived as not protection, or things that could be in a gray area, um, how much of a responsibility do you think has been on the men versus what a woman perceives as not protection
Give me an
or
example
being
for that.
unprotection? Okay. A girl goes to a party, gets drunk, has sex with somebody, calls it SA, when
Okay,
she
okay.
was into it. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. And
Um,
then, are you saying later she
she'll
kind of redacts that?
she'll kind of redact that and say that she wasn't protected in that aspect. Um, like I said, it'll be a lot of situations that, and I'm not saying all of them. I'm definitely not saying all of them. I'm not saying that it does not happen, but it nowadays I feel like the credibility of situations are totally the
Mm.
credibility is totally different now versus what it used to be, in the sense of understanding female nature and what a woman will do to get a baby, or what she'll do to get back at somebody. um a lot of those things aren't untrue either, and so now I kind of feel like it's a bit skewed. At one point, it was, I would say that I was conditioned to believe every time a woman opened her mouth, um
Believe all women, like the
yeah, I
catchphrase
would
said.
say that I would be under a certain type of belief like that for a while. And then, when you start to recognize bad behaviors, and you understand the manipulation, you understand the dramatics and stuff like that, it's a lot of the times I would say that the space is teaching me that a lot of things have two different sides to it. There's two different versions, and
Mm.
it kind of gets to be like that to me, because at one point I was on like, yeah, why would she lie about that? Why would somebody do that? And they very well would be on that type of time. So like I
Yeah, I guess
said,
I guess I guess as a guy in this situ, like, are you talking about like a third party guy or the guy that was actually involved in the action?
I would
So,
say the guy that was actually involved in that situation. I would say the opinions of men, the opinions of women, understanding how I've seen and have known women to operate in certain aspects. Have things get to be really, really interesting, and actually taking inventory gets to be really interesting, which is why I'm not saying that the guys aren't the guys aren't all wrong, the women aren't all wrong, but it's got to be some place in the middle. But we both have to be accountable for the bullshit on both sides. And I don't think that we're accountable for the bullshit on both sides as a society as a whole.
Okay, so you see Supreme clientele down here. It says if you insist on doing what you want to do, then assume responsibility for it. So there's an aspect of that um, so let the first thing I would respond with is why would why would you feel the need to take either side in that situation? You don't really know much information about either party. You see what I'm saying? So unless you were trying to identify yourself with a particular
Mm-hmm.
aspect of that person, it doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter which side you want to take.
I
I don't
I
see any value that can be brought from taking a side.
I think that when you've gone through certain situations and you are able to relate, and then you think about the things that happened to you in that situation, and um, the aspects you relate to that, of course you're going, why would anybody lie about that? Why would anybody try to demean a man's reputation or make the man out to be this, that, and the third? But um, I've also seen situations, not a lot, but I've definitely seen some situations where the woman is totally, totally wrong and the woman chooses to play victim. Definitely seen some things in that aspect. So it's not, for me, it's like when you go come up in a society, and like I said, I had a family who didn't preach that men weren't shit. I didn't have a family who did that. I had a family that was like, well, they did this and this happened and da 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 happened because they did that, and it was from both sides. And so it's hard. It's nowadays I say in most situations I do try to look more closely, but even in my subconscious, you still certain things you still don't necessarily want to come to terms with, and trying to work that out with myself. So I don't necessarily feel there's a need to pick sides because everything should be taken on a case by case basis. But it subconsciously, it's you still want to go lean back to, oh, a woman wouldn't do, she wouldn't do that. That's just, you know, you want to lean back to
Yeah,
that.
not even necessarily the woman, but just a person who was put in that horrible situation. You would want to think that they wouldn't just make something like that up. Just anybody put in that horrible situation. Um, but
Right.
what I'm thinking is, and going back to what Supreme said, the both parties in the situation themselves have a level of responsibility in the situation. So it's between the two or however many parties that were involved to work out whatever situation is going on. As far as the public sphere is concerned, it's more like, like I don't know. I don't know. I take the position that it's not even really a position. I just try to, I guess, understand what is best for the situation. Like if somebody's claiming that some horrible thing happened to them, then you know, and I know them, or I just want to show some level of empathy toward them because at least on some level they think that I would feel comfortable with just being like, hey, I'm sorry that happened to you. Um, go to whatever avenue that you have to take to ensure that this gets prosecuted so that things can go in the direction that people can take responsibility for the things that they say. But then again, on this, at the same token, I see what you're saying. Like uh, there's a lot of the situations where somebody could be lying and then they go to and then they go and it doesn't really take much to ruin a man's reputation in the public sphere, and not just reputation if they're innocent, but like they could actually go to jail based on hearsay, and then that's just gonna you got all kinds of fallout from that. I don't know, it's like that's why I really don't see the point in like taking a side. It doesn't really benefit it's gonna sound bad, but it doesn't really benefit you to take a side. You see what I'm saying? Like, you don't get anything from that. Um, if you have personal investment in the person, or maybe you just want to express empathy, I think that's fine. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't really see a point in really generally taking one side or the other. You know what I mean? Like, oh, this chick's out here lying on dudes, get her. Like, I don't, I don't, it's like, I don't know, and I don't want to make that kind of speculation because it could hurt one person or the other. Hey, Air Black. There's something I wanted to kind of harken back to, though. You guys were talking about like this casual feeling of numbness, of kind of overlooking things that you don't necessarily see as good or bad. It's just kind of something that happened, and it's just in the background. What a lot of I've been to therapy too, Sister George. So excuse if I go off in that direction. Start sounding like my therapist.
I'm due for a few sessions, so I'm not tripping at all.
I also recently went to the spiritual retreat, and we did all this trauma work and stuff like that. So
Send me
I,
the information. I've been
Oh
trying
wow.
to listen. I've seen some documentaries and stuff. Like, listen, I think that would be very interesting and very healing. So send me some information. I'm gonna start looking for that. That's a good idea. Thank you.
yeah. But what one thing so things that we're numb to, we're not. It's not like we actually don't feel anything from it. There's like your. It's almost like your body is in a fight or flight danger kind of sense. Um, and your mind has recognized that you won't like, if you were to feel what was actually what you if you were to go back to the original feeling, that it would overwhelm you. So instead of overwhelming you, your system kind of numbs out the pain so that you can continue to function. So when I harken back to the feeling of safety, and it's not even necessarily with men, because it can be in the environment too. But if men in the environment are kind of triggering these situations that, you know, cause this numbness, even if there's a few of them, then you not feeling safe in your environment could easily go down the path of you in associating that feeling of unsafeness with men who look like that. So while it could be like a numbing sensation, as an adult, um, I don't know. I guess my because I ain't trying to. I mean, nobody comes to my channel, but I ain't trying to set you guys up to get like clipped. but but yeah, there's a lot of. I think I'll use my wife as an example. So she's gone through some trauma in her life as well, and I won't use my wife as an example.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make sure I have an understanding of the question. What because you
Yes,
said
I
you were
guess I'm
talking about
trying.
numbness.
Yes, I guess I'm trying to say, is it possible that the numbness is actually the feeling of unsafety? Like, you think it's maybe you can
Mm.
think that it's numbness. Maybe you can think that you're
That's a
feeling nothing, but
But this
that's
underneath
a
is
that
the
good point,
feeling.
thing.
because if you think about it, I'm sorry, real quick. If you think about it, when Danny brought up that point, I actually kind of thought about the fact that I have just normalized so many things and kind of considered it essentially a part of the culture, not necessarily being numb to it, but it's like, oh, that's just what, like, for example, something small, but like, cat calling at the gas station and men trying to grab at you and the things like, or going into the corner store, like in the hood, and, you're an attractive woman. And like, I am not numb to it, but I've normalized it as a part of the culture. And as a result, I don't think about the fact that I don't feel protected in those moments. I literally just clutch my purse to my side and walk in the store as fast as I can. But it stems from me not feeling protected in that moment. It stems from me knowing that I'm approaching some vultures, and it may be a situation where I need gas, and not necessarily a situation where it's late at night or anything like that, but it's like, okay, I need gas. I get to get off and go to. And I'm thinking about like when I lived in Chicago. A lot of the gas stations on the south side, you may have young men hanging around, or somebody may just be pumping their gas, and there's a car full of guys, and like some of the things that I've endured, I don't even think about it and think about the fact or process the fact that I don't feel protected in this moment. But when I look back on them and I process it in current time, like right now in this moment, I understand that I didn't feel protected in that moment.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I'm trying to say. It's like uh your body understands things that you aren't processing consciously. So
Mm-hmm.
when you hold your bag to your side while you're at a gas station, you move as fast as you can. This is a fear response. Your body knows
But
that you're afraid, but you don't feel it. You see what I'm saying? You don't feel afraid because
Right.
you're used to it. Your
Mm-hmm.
body is
Normalized
reacting
it.
in a fear state. Yeah. So go ahead,
that
Sister Joyce.
that's a really interesting um that's a really, really interesting point. I think that a lot of us don't really give our traumas much of a thought process once we've made it through. And we don't really go back to explore a lot of things about those traumas and everything, right? So hold on to that.
Yes.
Then when you talk about a feeling like being numb to a certain thing is a feeling unsafety. So I can't necessarily say that that's necessarily like my thought process with things nowadays, right? So if I take concrete situation of like if I need gas and let's say I have to stop off in a bad neighborhood, and guys are catcalling or grabbing at me, I still don't feel like I'm necessarily in a bad situation, and more so understanding about the nature of certain situations. Then understanding how group thinks and what groups will do, whatever. I certain situations, there's not necessarily a fear or like a feeling on unsafety in understanding that, yeah, if you go to a gas station at nighttime and let's say you go in there and guys are catcalling, I just sometimes think that's what men do, or that's
So
just a
you normalize
situation.
it too.
I feel like I've probably more so normalized it because then there have been situations where I've been in where I was actually unsafe. And I don't necessarily think that I'm numb to situations where I was truly unsafe, like where I felt truly unsafe. Um, and and then even in a sense of feeling protected, I guess in understanding how I grew up and not necessarily being able to call on a man every time I felt like I was in a bad situation. I don't know. I think I've been able to make clear distinctions with the two in my head. Certain things
Yeah.
I feel like it's just the nature of people. So if you go somewhere and somebody looks good and people are catcalling, I've seen the same thing from women. So that doesn't make me think about, I just think that's just what people do. So I'm not going to necessarily say that I would be numb to certain situations. Then there are things where I would actually feel like I'm in danger and I recognize that I've been in danger, And I think if you haven't ever gone back to resolve those traumas, then I don't know. Does it make sense? Am I making any
But
sense?
like in
Yes.
that, I understand perfectly what you're saying. But I think for
Okay.
me, like the example that I gave about like the guys. So I know the reason that I say we've normalized it and, a woman might not feel protected in that instance is because if you say the wrong thing, literally that could result in you ending your life being ended, you being slapped, like literally. I've witnessed somebody decline someone's advances and like them smack the shit out of her and call her a b, like, so literally, that you like, I always do this thing where I smile and I'm friendly and I'm like, hi, no, thank you, and I'm just trying to get out of there as fast as I can, and it is literally because it's a method of me protecting myself. And literally, in those situations, yeah, that's the nature. Even having to think about it like, oh, well, that's the nature of men. Literally, we are civilized people. You're acting like animals at a gas station, grabbing at somebody, and like that is not what civilized people do. That's not what civilized beings do. So even thinking about it from that aspect, but when you're on high alert in those situations, if you say the wrong thing, it could result in, you being, called all out your name, being disrespected or worse.
Yes, and your body is a very rudimentary kind of system. So it's like very simple with how it processes things, especially when you're really young. So if you guys are so let's say this for instance, Sister Georgia, if you was your dad around when your mom was going through this time in her life where she was like kind of on and off of the bender, I guess.
No. So I moved to New York with my grandmother and grandfather, and my grandfather died in like 1991. And so I moved back with my mom in like 1994, and I had a stepfather. So my stepfather was very present up until he passed, for the most part. And I would say that over the last 5 to 6 years that me and my father's relationship has grown tremendously, but I would say that I've always had somewhat of a male presence around.
Yes. And would you say you felt safe with your mom?
When I was growing up with my mom, like when my mom was starting to get out there, I don't think it was necessarily a process that I thought about until I wasn't. Um, and then when I wasn't, um, I knew what it was. You know what I'm saying? So being that I knew what it was and I've been able to process and heal from that, there's certain situations that I would say maybe like one other situation where as an adult to where I'm gonna say that I really didn't feel safe. And then I was around a bunch of friends and they were able to assist in that. But it was a situation where I got myself in and it was like, ooh, I don't know if I'm gonna make it out of this good. And then I got somewhere. But um I don't know. I don't know. I would say for the most part, I when I didn't feel safe, I really didn't feel safe and I wasn't in a safe environment. But a lot of things that I've gone through in my life has already kind of been rectified in a sense of to where I didn't feel safe in the certain type of environments that I'll make myself available to, especially if you know the boogeyman exists. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not gonna try to put myself in the worst positions now. So
Yeah,
I don't
and
know.
no, no, I hear you. I'm just this is something that we all human beings do is kind of minimize what trauma is. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
and I just want to take you through a thought experiment for a second. Is say let's say as a young girl, you felt your environment was unstable. Um, in that unstable environment as a young girl, you're like, okay, I can't really rely on my mom for help or protection or for to make me feel loved and uh, shielded from whatever might come my way. Because as a baby and growing up, and probably until you're about 8, you're kind of like taking in information to be like, what's the world like? And if you if your foundation is relatively unstable, your mind's like, okay, I can't trust these people. So imagine that on top of your dad not being there. It's like, okay, well then where, if I can't trust her, then where is my dad? You see what I'm saying? And now
I
it's like,
do I
and
do to a certain degree, to a certain degree. Because I won't say that all of my environments were necessarily unstable. My grandmother worked for Mercy Home up until the day she died. She was able to bring in a pretty good book. My grandfather worked for mass transit in New York City. He brought in really good money. I had an auntie. Now I did go through situations in that regard, but um it's a hard thing because I'll kind of look at how people were raised, the things that they saw as protection, which may not have necessarily been protection, but in growing up, how they grew up and what they were taught, and the things that they followed through on what they were taught. I never felt like my mom didn't love me. I never felt that. I feel like my mom went through a lot of traumas and stuff herself that she never rectified,
yeah, yeah,
but I never felt a feeling of unloved. And then when things happened to me as a young girl, it wasn't because my mom didn't love me. It was my mom had her own shit that she had to go through. Um, I don't know. It gets to be a difficult thing to talk about because I'm kind of tearing up,
I'm
going back
sorry.
into those things. No, I'm
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
okay. I'm okay. No.
No, no, no,
Um
no. No. It's I
It's
want you to
okay,
know
and
that
you
I,
human.
no, I actually relish in conversations like this, so I'm good with it. It kind of takes me back and like really thinking about those situations. But like I said, a lot of things that I've gone through in life, a lot of situations that I've put myself in, I've rectified a lot of the things that I've gone through, and then understanding people, and then even understanding when people have a lot of different issues and when they're in certain places. So like conversations like this they're kind of difficult for me to have because like I said, there's a lot of things that I've already rectified. I've already I have an understanding as to why I did go through certain things. And like I said, I was protected until I wasn't protected. I never felt unloved. I never felt um it wasn't a thing in my mind that I just felt unsafe unless I was in an unsafe environment. And then I understand, at times, hindsight, you going out, you young, you partying, and you make bad decisions, and you understand the ramifications of those bad decisions, but you proceed anyway. I've been more so on that type of time. Um, and just doing what it is that I wanted to do and not being worried about certain things, and then understanding those situations. I've always been told that the boogeyman exists. And I don't know. It's interesting. But with my mom, my mom had her issues. Um, there was a time where I was unsafe, but I don't attribute that to what I felt like my mom, who my mom was to me and what my mom was going through. So I don't know, maybe I've been able to give her grace and maybe I have a different understanding about certain things, but I don't know.
no, I completely understand what you're saying, and I just want you to know that if this is, if this is too personal for you, or causes too much, pain for you right now, I'm more than willing to move on into something else. So please just let me know. If you
No, do your interview. Like I said, this isn't anything that I haven't talked about before, but it's certain things that we need to be able to talk about out in public, to let others know that they aren't alone in their thought processes, and we're here. It's okay.
Mm, yeah.
okay, okay, I just want to say this too. It's like, could you? So what I was saying, your body is relatively a um, simple. I'll call it a machine, but it's a little more than that. But it's a simple machine. It triggers emotions to help you understand that something is wrong, and then uh, what I guess what I perceive causes a trauma is when we go, I'm feeling these emotions, but I can't really do anything about this right now. So I need to store this energy up and put it off somewhere until I can address it later. And when we, so what we end up doing instead is telling ourselves a story about what we like, what we need in order to continue to function. So it would be one thing if that emotional energy is in the background and you just like you didn't think about anything else and you're like, oh well, that's gone. But it's another thing to be like, okay, my body feels unsafe right now. I need to put this away. I can't really deal with that. I'm too young. And then your body goes, and then your mind goes like follow up like an alley oop. Your mind goes like, okay, so I had to put like I have to be in this environment, so to I need to develop a reason why it's okay for me to continue to do this until I can get myself out of it. So it'll be like in a gas station situation where it's like, all right, I need to get gas. This is just the actions of men in my community, and this is just what they do. So, uh, in order for me to feel safe in this situation, or in order for me to continue to function in this environment, the story I'll tell myself is this is just what men do. But that fear is still in the background. So
Mm,
you clutch your purse to your side and you run into the thing because your body is not under any misconceptions. Your body knows what's going on. It's just back in the darkness where you can't see it. And your mind is going, but this is how men are. So, I'm just going to go into the store and get what I need. You see what I'm saying? Like there's and this is something everybody does. We kind of like develop these stories so that we don't have to deal with our emotional baggage. Um, and then what ends up happening is we get older and those stories are stronger because we just continue. So on top of that story being made, maybe you felt fear again because of that trigger brought up that fear. But then you're like, okay, I need another story for this fear, and then you throw that into the background. So as you get older, it just keeps happening like that. You just keep fragmenting and throwing things back until you get to a point where you got people with anxiety attacks, depression, and they're just overwhelmed by all this emotional energy that's in the background, and they don't know why because they have all these stories that make sense to them about why they have to deal with this stuff, but their body is like, yo, you're in trouble, like what are you doing? so, so so yeah, and I think there's a hold on, there's a good point here. Yep. Supreme says we compartmentalize our trauma until we get to a safe environment to process through it. This is exactly what I'm saying. And I think that's what we're
wow.
seeing. I think that's what we're seeing from the women and the men too. Um, I think a lot of,
Very insightful. That's a good point. Like that makes perfect sense.
uh, yeah, I think a lot of what we're seeing for men now is the processing of the trauma, um, going through the stories and trying to reach the emotional baggage so that we can move on. Um, but what makes me sad, what I'm seeing with men is that what used to be we come into this space and to self-actualize and figure these things out has leaned more in the direction of uh, I don't know, like there's this alpha your way through it kind of mentality that kind of
I
undermines
was just
the
gonna say
emotional
that. Do
situation.
Do men ever get to a place where they feel safe enough to unpack it? Because you know how black men are. Black men, for black people, therapy is taboo, but black men are less likely to seek therapy. And oftentimes, if you think about what you hear in this space, black men have not had those ideal environments to unpack, their trauma.
Exactly. Huh. Do you guys think that yeah, what do you guys think about that? That's a good point, Concrete. What do you guys think about that? Do you think that men, even here, even in the manosphere, have the space to really, um, really be in a safe environment to process through what they're feeling so they can
I
move
don't
on?
necessarily think so, because with women, with women, more women coming to the space and being vocal, and I think that men might not feel like the space is ideal for them to unpack any trauma. In addition to that, like we are oftentimes, very judgmental towards one another. Like look at the men in like look at the men in media who have had breakdowns and the judgment that they and the scrutiny that they've undergone. But also, if you think about it, this I think that sometimes we hit on trauma with certain people, and as a result they become very defensive. And I'm saying this because I actually just had this realization about myself. Oftentimes you will hear me become triggered and defensive when someone is hitting on a trauma or something that I haven't dealt with, or something that I don't want to talk about publicly, or it pains me to talk about publicly.
Yes.
I
And go ahead.
sorry. No, I was just gonna say that I don't think men, not in this space. I think men are creating more spaces for themselves to be able to do that. But definitely not here where anything you say can and will be used against you.
Oh, say
So
it.
I don't I don't think that a lot of men have that safety net here. I think men can kind of, and I don't necessarily think that it's a safety net. I think that they could come here and kind of be general in the sense that they've all had certain things happen with women, but it's kind of like waiting on who's going to bear it all first and then watch the response from that. And if there was a better response to men doing that, then I think it would be better. But I think it's more so the men to other men. If they bear something, we people use stuff against you, and in very harsh ways. So I don't think this is a safety net. I think people are creating their own outlets and being able to talk about it amongst themselves versus in a public arena.
Supreme is going to hit on exactly what I was going to hit, something I was going to hit on next. Do you think that women entering the space could be a kind of trigger for a lot of these guys trying to process this stuff?
I think when
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think that I think men do absolutely need their own spaces to build, to grow, and to become men. I do think that they do need that. But um, in certain aspects, when it comes down to social interactions, how we treat each other, our thought processes toward each other, I think that's also needed. How we interact with each other. If it comes down to separating ourselves from certain thought processes, I think that certain things do need to be put on display.
I think
Mhm.
too, when I think about your question, I think about when I probably a year or so into when I started to actually engage in this space, some of the responses that I saw to women in the comments, women were everything but a child of God. And I know literally we could come in and say hi. And there was one guy in particular, his name was Nutso, and he would go ape crap. Like soon as women were in the space. So I think that we were a trigger for him, that he had unresolved things that he hadn't dealt with, and we were absolutely triggering for him.
Yes, and I think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword because even BGS and Angry Man, like for some years ago, said that they realized this space was just a therapy couch for a lot of guys, and so on the one hand, you've got the manosphere becoming more popular, more mainstream. So people are entering, eyes are on the spaces to kind of see what exactly is happening here, what exactly is going on, what is this manosphere thing. And then on the other hand, and that brings more women into the space because they're like, hey, what's going on, guys? Let's fix it, and you can get over this, and we can move on, kind of thing. And then or you got people coming in and just making fun of everybody. So it's like, you're weak, you ain't shit anyway. I don't know what's wrong with y'all. You got this kind of attitude. And then on the opposite end of that, let's say no women ever join the space. Men, I don't think men have had. I don't think a lot of men, especially in the Black community, in our community, I don't think that we know how to move past the trauma. You know what I mean? So like we get in these spaces with men, and we're talking we're talking our shit or whatever, but is that, and that's like a little form of catharsis, but that's not really doing anything to move the, I guess what other people would say, move the needle. You know what I mean? Like there's still guys coming in saying like, you got alpha your way through that. Oh, you ain't nothing but a bitch. You got these kind of things happening too. But I think all these things are necessary. Um, one of the one of the things that I'm thinking about here, and maybe you guys can help me with this. I think in order, what do you guys think is needed in order for our community to survive?
I definitely think that we need a lot of healing and to establish at least friendships with each other. Um,
Friendships,
I
yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like we have a lot more in common than we don't um than we would normally have. I feel like we have a lot more in common than we have in differences. I think we're on the opposite sides of the spectrum with the same issues, but we have the same thought processes on the same issues, but just on opposite sides of the spectrum. I think we do have to recognize that everybody on both sides aren't bad people, and really being able to resolve that. But a lot of it is healing ourselves, and then being able to come back and even if it's not your choice, preference, whatever, but actually being able to come back and enjoy each other and get down to what we can relate on versus what makes us different. And I think we need to do a lot of that.
And before
I
you start, Concrete,
personally, oh,
maybe
go ahead.
maybe that starting point is the pain. Like honestly, opening up about, you know, I I love you guys, but there are times I felt unsafe. And these are those times. And that's not to say that I blame you for it, but to say that, you know, I want to be able to I want to be able to trust you better. And this is my olive branch for that. Go ahead, Concrete.
I personally think that we need to be more compassionate towards one another. I think that I see very little grace being given to one another. I think that women need to shut the hell up and listen. We talk about the lack of emotional intelligence that we see from men. Yet when men try to express what is going on in their minds, we shut them down. We, make fun of them. We invalidate their feelings. And I think that that's where we're all going wrong. I think that we need to honor what each other is saying. We need to allow space for each other to speak and remove the emotion before we respond. Really try to understand what the other is saying. I think that we absolutely need healing. We have generations of trauma that we've just literally we're tipping the iceberg. We're chipping away at the tip of the iceberg as it relates to all of the issues that we as a people have to unpack. But I really think that extending grace and compassion towards one another will take us a long way. If we're literally leading and operating with compassion, we won't be so hateful towards one another, trying to one up each other constantly, trying literally to fight not to be at the bottom and not recognizing that we're in the same boat.
Do you think so? There's a sentiment going that goes around that. So I'll let you know my position on it first, and then I will tell you how I hear this sentiment around the space. What I think is that all the unresolved traumas and all the emotional energy that we save up to kind of give us context for how to react in certain situations is kind of getting out of control. Um, it's like when so when we use the word trigger for PTSD, it means it trigger is just bringing up that emotional energy that you saved up in order to bring context to that situation. So let's say, going back to the gas station thing, your body feels fear, your mind brings up that story, then it stores all that, and it's like, all right, in a situation where I feel fear in this at this place, I will react this way. I'll clutch my purse and I'll run, or I'll make a speedy entrance, and then you get into another situation that's similar to that, but not the same. And your body goes, okay, similar situation, bring back the fear. All right, so what would I've done in that situation before is clutch my purse and move quickly. But instead, since I'm not at a gas station, I'm going to do something similar to that. I'm going to create a context that's similar to that, and I'm going to store this and throw it back. So it's like we just keep doing that because we're so unconscious to this process of trauma that we're constantly bringing back, and each trigger is just creating more. So it gets to a situation where you've got so many triggers that it's almost like you have multiple personalities jumping in and telling you to do stuff, and it's almost like making you crazy, like literally making you crazy. So I think what a lot of people fight or flight. Yeah, Supreme says fight or flight. It's I think what a lot of people see as they say black women are trying to control, or they're just domineering, or they're just aggressive, and they don't really have a context for that. I think it's just that triggering system and trauma, trying to protect them from these situations. I'm not saying that to say that they're off the hook for what happens when they react in that situation. It's like you still react in a negative, aggressive way, then people have the right to remove themselves of your presence. Nobody has the right to be treated in whatever way you see fit, just because you're going through whatever traumas you're going through. But at the same time, understanding that this person isn't just evil. They've been through a lot, and they are summoning these things to try to help protect them in these situations. So we see as the disrespect, and the aggressive nature really has a context that we can all understand, and that context is layered in the pain. But what I see people in the space say is that, oh, y'all just disrespectful. Y'all been hating on us for all this time. Y'all don't love us, that kind of thing. Can't trust you, that kind of thing. And it's like, in a way that's true, because that's how the men are experiencing the situation. It's like, can't trust you. Like, your reactions are actually causing me distress and me hurt. So now I have to be triggered in situation, and I have trauma responses from your trauma responses. You see what I'm saying? So I guess I'm saying that to say, what does healing even look like to you guys? What does that mean?
Oh,
I think. Go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Aaron.
Concrete.
Okay.
Okay.
I think for me, um, healing looks like a more peaceful environment than what we currently have. Healing looks like actually seeking to understand one another. Healing also looks like not simply limiting your understanding. And I think that a lot of people in this space have limited understanding. They say that they are red pill, but you're relegating your knowledge of the world around you to strictly women. Literally, that's it, that's all. However, as a conscious woman, you also have to have an understanding of the other elements that are impacting the relationships between Black men and Black women, the other elements that impact every aspect of your life. So literally, if you understand women, but you're not taking into account the way that women are conditioned, the things that have shaped the actions of these women, then I feel that you're limited in your understanding. And once you are truly healed, you're seeking to expand that understanding. You're, not, you know, simply engaging in these discussions for the sake of being able to speak your piece and shut down someone who has a dissenting opinion, but you're seeking to expand your mind and seeking to actually understand what the other person is that you're having the discussion with. You're not closed minded and closed off to ideas outside of your own, because when you are limiting yourself and you can't grow.
Healing to me looks like self-love and self-respect, um, being kind to ourselves, um, rectifying our traumas and making peace with ourselves, also understanding our shadow sides and why we use those things, um, what we do in order to protect ourselves, um, what it looks like on the outside of that is understanding where people are coming from, and a lot of the things that Concrete said, being compassionate with each other and trying to understand each other's perspective and trying to come together on things that we do have in common, and being able to love on each other in spite of what we don't have in common. That's what it looks like to me.
I know that I'm idealistic in this, but if I had to paint a picture for someone, and I'm just like an eternal optimist, it's ridiculous, but I think healing for me would also be akin to kind of what we experienced in Black communities in the 70s, like respect for one another, literally men in the community that weren't tolerating like BS from, other men or women, like women who literally, there were communities in the 70s where if you had a teenage son and he was on the block doing crazy stuff, they were going to come and talk to you about your son. If you didn't get your son in order, Black women were going to step to you and tell you, you're gonna have to leave the community if this isn't rectified. So literally us policing ourselves, but us having this shared sense of unity and operating together, actually appreciating and respecting one another, and extending love, like that sense of community that has gone by the wayside, that being reestablished within Black communities across this country. That, I know I'm idealistic, but that's what a healed community looks like to me if I had to, draw a picture for someone.
Mm. Yeah, I do have to put my baby to bed here soon. So, is there any last things that you guys want to say about either what we talked about or maybe just the manosphere in general?
I think this was a really good discussion. I enjoyed it. I think you should do more interviews. I do have a question. Why did you leave our channel?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question.
I'll answer
I
that
thought
after
so
Concrete
too,
goes.
girl.
I'll answer
Okay,
after Concrete goes.
so I will say this. I think that this was a fantastic discussion. I'm kind of like, oh, I wish more people were, here to engage because I really truly enjoyed it. I knew I would. I know I enjoy dialogue with you, like when you would come up on the panel. So it is exactly what I expected it to be. And thank you for inviting us over. Like, wish you much success on your channel. The conversations that you're having are important conversations to be had on a larger stage. So I just wish you all the
Absolutely.
luck as it relates to the success of your channel.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely.
I also like to probably invite you back for another interview as I kind of expound on what it is I'm trying to figure out here. I think I really got
Mhm.
a sense of what it is now, but yeah, if you guys would be comfortable with that, I would love to have you back. Um,
Absolutely.
okay, so why did I leave? All right, so it was it's a few things. I was not in a good place. I guess spiritually for myself. So, um, there was a lot going on in my life. I told you guys I went to that spiritual retreat, and that was like not too long ago. It was in
Mhm.
February. So, and I went there because I was desperate. So, I asked the universe to show me some kind of sign or way to get out of what I was in, and um, that spiritual retreat showed up. So I went to that, but I came back from that, and one thing that I learned that I was doing was actually doing what we talked about today. Is like I was going into places in my trauma, and traumas from my past were being triggered, and
Mm.
like I couldn't really put my finger on why or how it was happening, but I noticed when I would go, I liked you guys, or like you guys, so I'd go to your channel to engage with you guys because I like you guys. But then I'd be in this space, and then something about the way things were happening was bringing stuff up for me, and I was just like, I can't continue to stay here. Um, and I think
Right.
it had a lot to do with, I guess, how people. Um, and this is just my experience, so take this for a grain of salt. But um, with the way that it seemed like guys are being undermined, um, like guys are being, it didn't really. I don't know. Like you guys have a playful kind of back and forth kind of thing going on, and I recognize that. But there was something going on, especially in the interviews with some of the ladies that you had on the show, where it just felt like dudes were just getting like, it was just kind of like a shut up, you're dismissed kind of thing, and it just was rubbing me really the wrong way. So I had to
Really?
remove myself. Yeah, so I had to remove myself from that because it just, every time I would go there, and it would be like, especially if there's a lot of ladies in the chat room, um, talking to dudes or talking to me, they'd just be like, it just feel like it's like I don't want to argue with you. I'm actually here to try to understand things. So
Mhm.
I'm not
Mhm.
I'm not trying to have an argument with you. I'm just trying to like share points of view. And when they come up and they have like this kind of dismissive, demeaning kind of manner, I just can't do it anymore.
I actually understand and I appreciate your honesty. I'm sending you all the well wishes in the world to you and your family. You guys are just like so cute. I can like imagine what you guys look like, but I understand what you're saying and I appreciate your honesty. Um, I think that we've been in a male dominated space for so long, and most of our conversations are dominated by men that, we allow people to speak freely on our platform, and we have not taken into consideration, how people might be triggered from one side or the other. Um, our intent is, never to just be dismissive of another person's thoughts. I think that, in our conversation, some of our conversation or titles are like kind of to stir the pot, but we want people to come and engage. And our sincere hope is that, people are able to draw from one another's perspectives. I can't tell you how many ideas that I had or ways in which I viewed something have changed since my inception into this space. And I'm always hopeful that other people will be impacted in the same way. I, hope that at some point you'll come back and join us or just drop in every once in a while just to say hi, because I personally have always enjoyed engaging in dialogue with you.
I absolutely agree 100% with everything Concrete just said. I'm also glad you were able to be honest about it. And what she said was spot on. Um, the point was to have everybody be able to come say exactly what it is that they wanted. And if they were serious enough to have a conversation, then to be able to listen to that conversation and not be so judgmental on either side. Because there's been some things that's been said on our platform has been very hurtful. But even in
Absolutely.
trying to maintain those poker faces and let a guy get it out, I think that's something that she and I have both struggled with at times. And then,
Oh yeah.
when women come up, it's like, yeah, girl, I know exactly what you're talking about because I've been there too. But it's definitely to try to get both sides point of view on an assortment of issues. So but I definitely appreciate you being able to be honest about that. And I share Concrete sentiment when I say that we at least just hope that you just pop through and come love on us, cause shit, we need that.
Yeah, we
Um,
really do. Like we appreciate you, and maybe down the line, when you're in a different space, and you'll be like, okay, let me go back and see what the hell they're talking about over there. Whatever it
Or at
is.
least
But
come
yeah,
for
we
like the
appreciate it.
lighthearted parts, you know?
you
Yeah,
like
just say
the
hi.
that
What's
30
up,
minutes in
ladies?
the beginning where y'all are just like
Yeah,
talking about crazy
Yeah.
stuff.
before
At
you,
least come for that part. Concrete don't do nothing but keep up mess, so I just be
you
over
know
there.
what? I'm not about to.
Now make you guys a deal. I will continue. I kind of watch from the clouds every now and then, so I'm still around to some degree, but I just don't say anything anymore. What my the deal I'll make you guys is hearing that you guys have would like to protect yourselves, I guess, more from some of the uh, more crazy. I don't want to call it crazy. Some of the more insightful or the more incendiary commentary. I will continue to hold the wrench, and I will make sure that somebody who gets way out of pocket is immediately, silenced for like the 300 seconds. But you
we
know,
we appreciate that.
but
Right.
as but as far as like engaging in the chat, until I can feel comfortable with that, I won't engage.
We respect that. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Protect your boundaries.
Absolutely.
That's
Okay,
healing is about that too. You know.
exactly. Know your boundaries and enforce them.
Send me that information though. Um,
All right. All right. Thank you, guys.
thank you, Black
Thanks,
Wizard.
Black Wizard. Tell the missus we said hi.
Yes.
Yep. You guys have a good one.
You too.
Yeah, you too.
Oh, and thank you to the chat for listening, by the way. Um, More than usual. I have 8, so that's nice. Hopefully, you guys liked or disliked at your leisure, and uh, maybe I'll see you guys for the Obsidian interview that I'm having on Monday. Um, so yeah, yeah. See you then if you're back, and you guys have a good one too. Thank you for showing up.